What is up, Miracle Fighters, and welcome back to the Team Miracle 4 channel. Today I'll be doing a deck profile for yet another V Premium Clan Collection deck, this time for Roxy's Murakumo Nura Hyouga Stealth Fiend deck. The Chief of the Stealth Fiends of Murakumo has finally arrived in V Murakumo, and the new Stealth Fiends Chief Nura Hyouga takes aggression to a whole new level in Murakumo's newest deck. This build is a very interesting build that makes use of cards with Stealth Fiends in their card names and can create basically a whole new standing field mid-battle. To understand what I mean, let's first take a look at the Vanguard's effect. So, I'll start as Adverse Spike. It doesn't matter which starter you play. Alright, just play any V Murakumo starter. Okay, so let's have a look at our main unit of the deck, and that is Stealth Fiend Chief Nura Hyouga. Nura Hyouga has two effects. The first is an activated effect. So you can counterblast one, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and call a Stealth Fiend from among them to rearguard circle. If the opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, Nura Hyouga gets +1 drive for every 2 Stealth Fiends on the field. Basically, to get the most out of this effect, you will want to fill your field with different named Stealth Fiends, and then call one more Stealth Fiend out from the deck with different names than the ones on the field. So an example would be that you have these 3 Stealth Fiends, which honestly isn't that difficult to accomplish, right? So what you can do is you can use Nura Hyouga's Counterblast, check the top 5, and you can fish for something different. So, this is not a very good top 5, but you can just, get out a Fight Seeker or whatever, shuffle the deck, and then since now we have 4, Nura Hyouga gets +2 drives. So he gets +1 drive for every 2, so he gets +2 drives, and you will have a 4 drives Vanguard. So yeah, pretty neat. However, that's not all. Nura Hyouga's second effect is the spicy one. As long as she's on Vanguard Circle, when a unit card is revealed for a drive check, if it is a normal unit and has Stealth Fiend in its card name, Nura Hyouga calls that card to rearguard circle and gives it 10k. If not, that card goes to the drop zone. In other words, anything that you reveal from your drive check that is not an order card goes straight into the drop zone. Since we're not playing any orders in V Murakumo, basically from your grade 3 turn onwards, as long as you ride into Nura Hyouga, which you should, none of your drive checks will be added to hand. This might sound bad, however, in exchange, you will get to superior call any Stealth Fiends that you drive check. This essentially helps to create the multi-attacks, and because those called Stealth Fiends get +10k and actually plus to your field, you sort of prefer to drive check your normal unit Stealth Fiends as opposed to triggers in this deck. Nura Hyouga trades handsize for one of the most aggressive first grade 3 turns I've ever seen in Vanguard. If you're lucky with your drives and setup and are going second, you can make 7 attacks in a single turn, with most of the attacks hitting pretty high numbers. If your opponent doesn't have a large enough hand or doesn't check enough defensives, you can absolutely steamroll the opponent and push for damage very quickly. What's a hand if your opponent dies before they can even do anything? So, yup. Nura Hyouga will the entire deck will basically revolve around Nura Hyouga and this ability. So yup, we play 4 copies of our main card, the Nura Hyouga. Nura Hyouga's main weakness, of course, is that since none of your drive checks are added to your hand, you may find it hard to defend yourself. Hand size can be a big problem against high critical and high powered attacks, as you'll be seeing yourself no-guarding most of them. If your opponent gets lucky with defenses, or if they are somehow able to survive your rush and tank your attacks, and are also playing a deck that can make a comeback easily, you might also just die against them. Hence, to prevent ourselves from dying too early or too quickly, we are running the Shirayuki engine, both for defense and also for a bit of synergy with Nura Hyouga. So the Shirayuki engine basically consists of the Fantasy Petal Storm Shirayuki, the Stealth Fiend Jakotsu Girl, as well as the Stealth Fiend Rainy Meadow. Let's have a look at Fantasy Petal Storm Shirayuki. So, I'm sure you guys are already familiar with Shirayuki. She has basically played a role in all V Murakumo builds so far, and is also the clan's and also this deck's strongest form of defense. When placed on any circle, Vanguard, Rearguard or Guardian circle, you may swap +2 to choose 3 units in your opponent's front row and give them -5,000 power until the end of turn. If Shirayuki is placed on Vanguard circle or Guardian circle, the chosen units get -10,000 power instead of -5. Shirayuki basically acts like a 10k shield for 3 attacks, which really makes up for the lack of defense this deck might face. Being able to be used on Vanguard and Rearguard circle means that Shirayuki also works offensively, so if you're going for a final turn push, you can also call Shirayuki down to reduce the opponent's Vanguard's power and force them to guard with even more cards from the hand. Since this deck only really wants to stay on Nura Hyouga, Shirayuki's Vanguard skill isn't that relevant, but in the off chance that you miswrite, Shirayuki can also add another copy of herself from the drop zone to your hand. So we only play 3 Shirayukis because this deck can search her out very easily, and I think 3 is enough. 4 is a bit too much. She doesn't have the Stealth Fiend name, so she cannot be super called up with Nura Hyouga, and most of the time you will not have that much solo, so to use all 4 at once, I think 3 is more than enough. While Shirayuki does not synergize directly with Nura Hyouga due to her not being a Stealth Fiend, her support cards fortunately and very coincidentally are Stealth Fiends. Jakotsugo and Rainy Madam. Let's have a look at Jakotsugo first. We max out on both, right? Because they have the Stealth Fiend name, and secondly because this deck really relies on Shirayuki for defense. So having these 2 will be very useful, as you'll see once we go through the effects. So first one is Stealth Fiend Jakotsugo. Jakotsugo's effect is a Shadow Stage ability, which is basically on Rearguard circle. If her attack does not hit, you can look at the top 7 cards of your deck, search for up to 2 Shirayukis, put one of them into your hand and the other goes to the drop zone, and then you get to shuffle your deck. If you did not add any Shirayukis, if you did not reveal any Shirayukis, you soul charge 1 instead. Very useful card. So Jakotsugo is basically the searcher for your Shirayukis. And even if you miss, the soul charge can also help to fuel cost for Shirayukis that you might already have in your hand, or for future Shirayuki's activation. By putting a Shirayuki into the drop zone, Jakotsugo also sets up for Rainy Madam's effect. Rainy Madam's effect reads: on Rearguard circle, when any of your attacks unit does not hit, you can put herself into the soul to return a Fantasy Petal Storm Shirayuki from the drop zone to your hand. This means that after Jakotsugo mills the Shirayuki from the deck, Rainy Madam can just get it back to hand while also adding soul. Essentially, both Jakotsugo and Rainy Madam help to ensure that you have at least 1 Shirayuki in circulation throughout the game, so that you can keep recycling and reusing Shirayuki's ability for either defense or offense. In essence, you use Jakotsugo to search, and then use Rainy Madam to reuse the Shirayuki. So yep, we play 3 Shirayukis and then 4 of each of these support cards. Now with the Shirayuki engine aside, we can actually go into the main bulk and the most important part of the deck, which is the Stealth Fiends, since this is a deck centered around Stealth Fiends. Just a little context before I begin. Before building the deck, Roxy and I actually sat down to look through all the Stealth Fiends currently in V-Series Murakumo. There weren't a lot of options, but we were surprised that there was actually enough options for this deck to be, playable. Something interesting that we hope could happen was to be able to use the Stealth Fiends from Nubatama as well, since a World card used to be from Murakumo but now is in Nubatama, and having Tsumujibasho and Kurobani Tengu from Nubatama in this deck could also give more control to this deck. Of course, clan mixing is not possible, and just from Murakumo we are able to get a good base of Stealth Fiends that could be played in this deck. And some of these Stealth Fiends also happen to be staples, I think, going forward with this, with the Nura Hyouga deck. One of them will be the Stealth Fiend One-Eyed Noodle. Once again, this card is a card that you will see in many other Murakumo builds because of just how good it is. So I play 4 copies of it. Let's have a look at its effect. So on Rearguard Circle, if you have another unit with the same card name as this unit on your Vanguard Circle or Rearguard Circle, One-Eyed Noodle gets the ability to boost. So it's a 12k booster minimum, and an additional ability. At the end of each turn, If you have 5 or more units, you can move it into the soul to draw a card. Although Nura Hyouga doesn't clone your units, Nura Hyouga does dig through the deck for Stealth Fiends, and your drive checks will be bound to make you call in Noodle, one-night Noodle sooner or later. So it is actually not too difficult to get this effect to activate. Noodle is super good in this deck for the draw power and also for the additional soul charge to make activating Shirayukis more consistent. As I mentioned when talking about Nura Hyouga, your drive checks don't get added to your hand, so we take any amount of card draw that we can get. And yep, Noodle being a costless card draw is super good. Furthermore, Noodle is also a grade 3 with 12k base, meaning that if you superior call it out with Nura Hyouga, it gets plus 10, making it hit for 22,000 power. So yeah, it can be a 22k attacker that can hit over defensives most of the time. So yeah, Noodle is very good. And if your field is clogged up, if your front rows are clogged up, you may even consider calling this to the back row for the ability to boost as well, which is pretty decent as well. So yep, we play 4 copies of One-Eyed Noodle. The other grade 3 Stealth Fiend that we have in this deck is the Stealth Fiend Morate Surveillant. Currently have 1 proxied one, so we still need to get 1 more, but our deck list will run 2. So let's have a look at Morate Surveillant. So Morate Surveillance ability is when its attack does not hit, so once you can Shadow Stitch on Vanguard and Rearguard Circle, if you have 3 or more Rearguards, counterblast 1, you can search your deck for up to 1 card with the same card name as one of the units, reveal it, put it into your hand and shuffle your deck. Basically, Morate Surveillant clones one of the units into your hand. Morate Surveillant provides a lot of utility in this deck, as you can use its effect in a lot of ways. You can use it to add another copy of a Vanguard into your hand so that you can rewrite next turn, get the XL gift for more plussing, or you can add a Shirayuki from your deck to your hand as long as you have a Shirayuki on the field, or you can add Ready Madams, which are 10k guards, from the deck to your hand for more defense. So depending on what you add to your hand, Morate Surveillant has the potential to increase your defense, and because you're adding to your hand, you're also increasing your hand size, which once again is very good because this deck's hand size will be kind of limited, will be very limited. The only issue with Morate Surveillant is that it costs Counterblast, which competes with Nura Hyouga. So Murakumo currently is one of the, I don't know if it's the only clan, but it's one of the clans, the few clans in V that does not yet have a counter charger. So Counterblast usage has to be carefully monitored. So most of the time you'll only get to use Morate Surveillant like once or twice, because you'll be using the Counterblast more for Nura Hyouga and another grade 2 that I'll be talking about very soon. But yeah, Nura Hyouga is definitely a very good card in his deck. Okay, so from V Clan Collection, we didn't just get Nura Hyouga, but we also got 2 new Stealth Fiend grade 2s that directly support her. We have Stealth Fiend Lady Silhouetta, as well as the Stealth Fiend Fright Sickle. Let's have a look at Lady Silhouetta first. So on plays on Vanguard Circle and Rearguard Circle, on plays on Vanguard Circle or Rearguard Circle from hand, you may counterblast 1 and reveal a grade 2 or less card from a hand. If you do get to search your deck for up to 1 card with the same card name as the card revealed for this cost, call it to Rearguard Circle and shuffle your deck. In other words, Lady Silhouetta clones a card from a hand and pluses to the field. This allows you to start aggroing from the get-go as early as turn 2, as it converts 1 unit to 2, and the called unit does not disappear, which is very good, since you can retain board presence for Nura Hyouga the following turn. Lady Silhouetta also has a second ability, which is when her attack does not hit, so once again Shadow Stitch, you can put her on the bottom of your deck to choose one of your opponent's rearguards and also put it on the bottom of their deck. With the way this deck plays, you'll be calling over your units quite a bit because remember, Nura Hyouga will be calling your Stealth Fiends that you drive check. So Lady Silhouetta's Mirage ability synergizes very well with Nura Hyouga. If you're going to be calling over your own units, you might as well free up your circles yourself and get a pseudo retire off of it as well. All in all, Lady Silhouetta definitely works very well in his deck, and we play her at 4 copies. The other new Stealth Fiend is also another one that has a Mirage ability. When Fright Sickle attacks on the rearguard circle, you may have it get plus 5000 power until the end of that battle. If you do at the end of the battle, you put it on the bottom of your deck, and if Fright Sickle was placed by a card's ability in this turn, you can draw a card. The only two cards that make you superior call units in this deck will be Nura Hyouga as well as Lady Silhouette. So this card will pair up very well with these the aforementioned cards. Once again, as I've mentioned, clearing your field yourself allows you to call more attackers with Nura Hyouga without minusing too much to the field, and being able to draw you one card after returning it to the bottom of the deck after its attack means that you also get to replenish your hand size, so it's a 1-for-1 trade, which makes Fright Sickle actually a pretty decent card to be played in this deck. Being able to hit for 14,000 unboosted and 24,000 with if you call it out with Nura Hyouga's effect means that it's one of our higher hitting attackers as well. Since Fright Sickle can also work with Lady Silhouette, if you have this in your hand as well as a Lady Silhouette by turn 2, you can also go for some pretty decent early rush. So yep, we max out these two new Stealth Fiends at 4 copies each. Last but not least, for the normal unit, we are playing 4 copies of the very generic Grade 3 Searcher that every clan has. For Murakumo, ours is the Gateway Stealth Rogue Ataka. So all the Grade 3s in this deck are very viable targets. You will especially want to look out for your main Vanguard, Nura Hyouga or Shirayuki. Nura Hyouga because in this deck you only really want to ride into Nura Hyouga, and Shirayuki you can just add her. If you see Shirayuki in the top 5, you can just add her into your hand and then discard it, because you will still be able to return her back into your hand using Rainy Madam's effect. Essentially, Ataka acts like another Shirayuki Searcher in this deck, and Shirayuki, as I've mentioned, is super important in this deck for the defense. So having more ways to access Shirayuki is always appreciated. Now, just like any other Grade 3 Searcher, Ataka also has an ability to get plus 5k. For him, it activates if there are 2 or more units with the same card name as any of your units. Basically, if any 2 of your units share the same card names. It's very easy to get this ability off in this deck, because as you can see, we're playing a lot of 4-offs, right? You will definitely have duplicates on the field. So most of the time, Ataka will be 13k. The only con about Ataka is that it's not a Stealth Fiend, so it can't be superior called out with Nura Hyouga, and doesn't count to the different card names on the field for Nura Hyouga to get the additional drives. But for now, he's still Murakumo's best Grade 1. Because Murakumo really doesn't have a lot of Grade 1 options, right? Generic Grade 1 options. So Ataka will do for now. With that, we are basically done with the normal units. As you can see, it's pretty much all Stealth Fiends except for your 4 Atakas and your 3 Shirayukis, which I will argue are still staples that you cannot remove from the deck as yet. Okay, so let's just put this here. I guess we can now move on to the triggers. As I've mentioned multiple times in this video already, with the nature of this deck, your hand will be kinda small. So to compensate for Nura Hyouga's effect, this is the trigger lineup that we have settled upon. And that would be the 8 draws, 4 crits, and 4 heals. Okay, let's first talk about the 8 draws. So Roxy and I actually have 2 different trigger lineups for this deck, but both of our trigger lineups include at least 8 draw triggers. The keyword being at least. So I'll be showing off a more interesting one after this. But yeah, 8 draws. 4 draw PGs, they're definitely needed since we don't play any Grade 1 Sentinels in this deck. And PGs are just super important against a lot of clans right now. The other draw that we play is specifically this one, and we have to play specifically this one if we want to play additional draw triggers, and that's because this draw trigger has Stealth Fiend in its card name. So Everwing, right? Having Stealth Fiend in its card name means that it counts towards Nura Hyouga's ability to increase her drive checks. So if you look at Nura Hyouga again, her ability to increase drive is for every 2 of her rearguards with Stealth Fiend in her card names. So even though Everwing cannot be superior called by Nura Hyouga because it's a trigger unit, But if you call it from your hand, it still counts as a different named Stealth Fiend on the field for you to add drive for Nura Hyouga's effect. This comes in very handy as it increases the consistency of having different Stealth Fiends, because now with one of our triggers being a Stealth Fiend, we have a total of 8 differently named Stealth Fiends in this deck, giving Nura Hyouga a higher ceiling for the number of potential drives. In fact, if we have all of them, all different ones on the field, right, including this one, Nura Hyouga can actually get up to +4 drives, which sounds pretty insane. Right, so yeah, if you want to play extra draws, Everwing is definitely a must include. We like the 8 draws as well because at least, if you check these cards, they are adding cards into our hand during the drive check. If it's any other trigger, you add nothing to your hand. At least with the draw triggers, you are increasing our hand size, and we take any card draw that we can get in this deck. It's basically Vanguard 0 logic here. So in Vanguard 0, drive checks don't get added to hand. Hence, when the game first came out, players like us realized that 9 draws was the way to go for the majority of decks, as they actually plus their hand during drive checks, and they replenish the hand, and you're not losing cards every single turn. So same thing for this deck. Having the additional draw triggers really does go a long way. 4 crits also play this deck because early game, if you check crits, it will make it easier for you to overwhelm your opponent once we get to the late game. Right? Nura Hyouga is a very finisher type card. It's a very late game type card. So you want your opponent to be at high damage as quickly as possible, so their multi-attacks can actually win you the game. If you draw into them, they're also still 15k shield, so they're also pretty decent for guarding. We don't play any front triggers because the way that we play this deck, your Vanguard will most of the time be attacking last. You will attack with your rear guards first, and your Vanguard will be attacking, after most of your front row has attacked. So yeah, there's no guarantee that the front trigger will come after you have super caught your new normal units. So yeah, crits actually plays better and feels more logical to run other compared to fronts. For the heal triggers, we are playing the 4 Heal Guardians. Heal Guardians are super important in this deck, which is a deck that lacks defense a lot. So Komandori dope. Players who play against Nura Hyouga, your opponents basically, will know that the deck will not increase in hand size much later on, so they will tend to rush it down before Nura Hyouga can set up. Heal Guardians thus will help us to survive against your opponent's first grade 3 turn or grade 2 turn rushes. You could play these Stealth Fiend heal triggers. For example, Bamboo Fox or Yukihime, because they are Stealth Fiends and they're additional targets to be counted for Nura Hyouga's effect. But overall, Heal Guardians does provide much more utility for this deck. To be honest though, how many times will you really want to be calling heal triggers on your hand? If you have this, most of the time you'll be keeping them in your hand, you will not be calling them down. Most of the time, if you want to call triggers, it will be the draw triggers, right? Not the heal triggers. So yeah, I don't see a point in playing this when these guys provide much more defense early on in the game. Now I did mention there's a different trigger lineup, so this is what our first trigger lineup has been, and we've enjoyed this trigger lineup quite a bit. But recently Roxy has been trying out a more different one that removes the draws, that removes the crits and adds in 4 more draws. So this is the 12 draw Nura Hyouga trigger lineup. Roxy's been playing this trigger lineup for quite a while now, at least a month, probably 2 months, and her feedback is that her hand size is pretty decent. It's not too tiny. She sees all the pieces. She has no problems finishing games as well, even with the crits out of the deck. In fact, I think Roxy prefers this build rather than the 8 draw build. The additional draws really do help to ensure that she is able to guard the opponent's turn, whilst also drawing into her Stealth Fiend, so that Nura Hyouga can get the additional drives and create even more multi-attacks. It's definitely another way to build the deck, and I can see 12 draws working. I think deck out can be an issue here, but generally games don't last that long for you to deck out. So depending on you guys, you guys can play either 8 draws, 4 crits, or you can just play the 12 draw build that Roxy has been trying out and has been enjoying so far. So yep, that's our trigger lineup. Oops. As for alternatives, I've seen some builds playing the Grade 1 Perfect Guards. So Murakumo's Grade 1 Perfect Guards are also Stealth Fiends, which means they do work with Nura Hyouga, right? With Hamper Gapper and the better one, which is Kiri Fubuki, because this has a Vanguard effect. So if you want to play Grade 1 PGs, you should opt for this one. So Grade 1 PGs actually do have a use if you want to play them in Stealth Fiends. It's because they can work with Morate Surveillant. So if you end up superior calling, the Grade 1 PGs with Nura Hyouga, if you have Morate Surveillant on the field and your unit attack does not hit, you could actually tutor for a PG into your hand using Morate Surveillance effect. So this is a very interesting interaction which Roxy and I have considered, but ultimately we did not choose to play, the Grade 1 PGs. We still prefer the draw PGs because we're already playing so many draw triggers. So might as well just play, the draw PGs as well. And there really isn't, much space in this deck, as you can see, to put in the 4 Grade 1 PGs without removing essential pieces, in my opinion. But yeah, you guys could try the Grade 1 Sentinels to see whether you like them or not. I think they're still a valid option that you can play for this deck. Other than that, not much alternatives. I guess instead of the Fantasy Petal Storm Shirayuki, you might consider tacking in 1 copy of this, 6 Flowers of Phantasm Shirayuki. So this one works a little differently from the one that we are currently playing. The one that we're currently playing minuses 10k from 3 units in the front row, but the 6 Flowers one minuses 30,000 from one of your opponent's front row units. So it's more focused towards 1 attack, but it minuses even more from the attack. So this one is good against decks that have, 1 gigantic attack, for example, Hamil, Angel Feather Hamil. This can make Hamil guardable. So, yep, it has a slightly different use than the Shirayuki that we currently have. And occasionally, Roxy do wish that she has access to this. So yeah, this is definitely an option that you guys might consider if you're playing Shirayukis in this deck. This one also has a Vanguard and Rearguard effect, which says that if your unit's attack does not hit and your Vanguard is a Shirayuki, you can counterblast 1 to minus 10,000 power from one of your opponent's front units. And if she's a Vanguard, you can even call a Shirayuki from the drop zone to an open rearguard circle. It doesn't really come up that often, but it does sort of work with your Mirage cards, the cards that disappear from the field, like this too. And can be another game ender for the deck as well. So definitely an option. Currently Roxy is playing these 3, but she's considering 2 and then 1 of these, just for certain matchups where the minus 30k can be more effective, more useful. Yep, other than that, it's pretty much it. The other Stealth Fiends not included in this deck are mainly because they're either redundant, have pretty bad effects, or just don't synergize well with Nura Hyouga. Whatever is good, we've tried to fit into the deck, and this is the final product. Overall, the Nura Hyouga deck is a highly aggressive deck that forgoes defense for very explosive and fast-paced attacking turns. The deck has great killing potential and is the type of deck to kill the opponent with 1,000 strikes. When Nura Hyouga's effect was first revealed, we all thought that she'd be kinda bad, but we didn't dismiss her immediately. We tried the deck out and both Roxy and I were pleasantly pleased by the performance of the deck. Depending on what Stealth Fiend cards Busho decides to release in the future, the deck has a lot of potential to grow. In fact, the next V-Clan collection, which is coming out in about a week for Jap and 2 more months for English, has already new support for this deck. Platinum Blonde Fox Spirit Tamamo's skill has been revealed, and Tamamo is a card that might just make its way into this deck. So when revealed in your drive check, Tamamo can call itself to rearguard circle. So I'm glad Tamamo has this effect because Tamamo isn't a Stealth Fiend, so Nura Hyouga cannot call it out by her own effect. So Tamamo having this effect to just call itself out means there's another target that can appear during a battle phase from your drive checks, so that's always welcome. And then when placed on rearguard circle, Tamamo can change its card name to the card name of another unit in the drop. This one works well not only with Nura Hyouga but also with Yasuie. so that you have more, cloning targets. But in this deck, I would say that Tamamo will be useful to either make your one-eyed noodle easier to activate. Let's say you have a one-eyed noodle in a drop zone and one on the field, right? Or you could also use its effect to proc the additional 5k of Ataka. But of course, all this is only possible if you have a well-established drop zone. But the main effect of Tamamo will be the third effect, which is when it attacks on Vanguard Circle or Rearguard Circle, if you have 3 or more different Stealth Fiends, you may Soul Blast 1 to give it plus 10,000 power and plus 1 drive until the end of the battle. At the end of the battle, if it is on Rearguard Circle, you return Tamamo back to your hand. Now this is super amazing for the deck. As Nura Hyouga is more of a late game card, I can see Tamamo acting as sort of like the first right for the deck in the future. Getting power and drive means that you still have pressure, and the additional drives mean that you get to build up your hand first before you let loose with Nura Hyouga in the later turns. Even as a rearguard, Tamamo is also amazing since it hits for 22k unboosted. So even though Nura Hyouga doesn't give it power up, right, because it's not a Stealth Fiend, but being able to power itself up is very good. And 22k means they can hit over defensive triggers against most Vanguards. Bouncing itself back into the hand also clears the field for your superior calls for Nura Hyouga, and it also increases your hand size, either as discard fodder for PGs and stuff, which will be great against certain matchups. Its on-place effect is also super good, as by turning itself into anything in a drop zone, you can combine it with Morote Surveillance to basically clone anything from a drop zone and tutor anything that you need into a hand. If you desperately need a Shirayuki but is in a drop zone, not on the field, you can just use Tamamo to copy it and then have an attack miss so that you can proc Morote Surveillance. And if you need to draw PG desperately, you can just copy it and then you get to fish it out from the deck. So you don't have to call a PG from your hand in order to clone it, right? So overall, Tamamo does add a lot of value to the deck, and we just can't wait to try it out in this deck. Space is looking kind of tight now, as I've mentioned, so what we cut has to be considered very carefully. So that will be a testing in progress. But for now, I hope you guys got some insight into the Nura Hyouga Stealth Fiends deck. Roxy and I have really played it for a while and tried to make the best build for it. This might not be the best build, this might not be what some of you guys have in mind, but this definitely is one that we've been enjoying a lot, and we've also seen some success with this one. That's why we're sharing it with you guys. The deck, I feel, needs a bit more Stealth Fiend support, especially in the grade 1 slots where there's only Rainy Madam as the Stealth Fiend. And if one day we are forced to cut out the Shirayuki engine, I really wish that we get more Stealth Fiend grade 1s to try to make up for the loss in Rainy Madam. But for now, I don't see the Shirayuki engine leaving the deck anytime soon. I think it's the added defense is very, very important. But basically, with the existence of Nura Hyouga, any Stealth Fiend support, any Stealth Fiend card that Busho decides to come up with will need to go through considerations, right, to prevent it from breaking Nura Hyouga. But yep, with that said, if you guys have any queries or suggestions for the deck, do leave them in the comment section down below, and we will get to them ASAP. With that, we've come to the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this deck profile. We'll see you all very soon in the next one, and for now, bye guys.